Have you ever noticed how life can change without really changing? The business can get bigger, but the pressure feels the same. You may make more money, but the worry about money doesn't go away. You you can leave a relationship that wasn't working, and not long after that, you find yourself having a different version of the same relationship with someone new. Different circumstances, same experience. And after a while, we start drawing conclusions. Maybe this is just who I am. Maybe this is what success costs. Maybe I'm just not good at this. Maybe I'll never feel peace. Most people accept those conclusions because when something keeps happening, it starts to feel like truth. But what if the repetition isn't telling you who you are? What if it's showing you what's been running underneath? Because there's a reason the same experiences keep returning, and it's not your personality, it's not your bad luck, it's not a character flaw. It's a cycle. And it's the cycle of programming. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. And here's an example of what that cycle looks like. So think about someone who grew up in a home where money was always tight. There was tension around every bill. They maybe this person watched their parent work constantly and never get ahead. Maybe money was the source of every argument that they can remember. And they didn't just witness financial struggle, they interpreted something from it. Money isn't secure. Everything can disappear. You can never let your guard down. Now, they may never have said those words out loud. They may not even know that they believe them. But years later, let's say that person has built a successful business. They make more money than anyone in their family ever made, anyone that they grew up with ever made. They've got savings, investments, assets, every reason to feel safe, but they don't. They still wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a feeling that they can't explain. They still brace themselves, even when things are going well. They still live like someone who hasn't yet earned the right to feel safe. And from the outside looking in, it looks like ambition. From the inside, it feels like responsibility. But underneath both, there's still someone that believes safety could disappear at any moment. So the circumstances changed, but the story didn't. And because the story didn't change, neither did the experience. And here's how the cycle of programming actually works. It begins with an inherited story. Typically, something happens before we even know we can question it. Something that was said, something that was modeled, something that landed in a way that left a mark. And we gave it meaning. And that story becomes an adopted belief. Not because it's true, but because we held it long enough that we began living as though it were true. And once we believe it, the belief becomes a conditioned behavior. We begin acting as though the belief is true, automatically without choosing to. And then those behaviors create experiences. For example, of the experiences, the person who believes people can't be trusted never fully opens their heart and lets someone in. And so whoever they're in relationship with feels the distance and eventually leaves. And they think, see, people can't be trusted and always leave me. The leader who believes everything depends on them and holds on to every important decision. Well, their team never fully develops, nothing moves without them, and eventually they look around and think, see, I really do have to do everything myself. Those experiences become our life, not occasionally, consistently, reliably. And it's the same ceiling, the same pattern, the same quiet resignation that this is just how things are. And eventually our life, because of those experiences, becomes the evidence that the story was true all along. In other words, the cycle validates itself. That's why it feels like reality. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And you can think about it like this. Imagine wearing tinted glasses your entire life without ever knowing they were there. You wouldn't see the tent, you just see the tinted world. That's what the cycle does. It doesn't feel like a story running in the background. It feels like reality. And so when the same experiences keep returning, we don't think, oh, there's this story creating this. We think this is just how things are. And that's why really smart people can keep repeating patterns, even though they understand intellectually what's going on. They know they overwork. They know they need to delegate. They know they should slow down. They're not lacking information. They're just living inside a cycle that makes the behavior feel necessary. You can know you need to slow down and still feel unsafe when you do. You can know your team is capable and still feel compelled to take control. You can know this relationship is different and still brace yourself for the same ending, because the behavior isn't being driven by what you know. It's being driven by a story, belief, and behaviors. And most of what we believe is invisible until it's not. And that brings us to the hardest part of this, that to actually sit with. Some of what you've built, some of what you call your edge, may be, and most likely is, the cycle producing results. The drive that built the business may also be stealing your presence. The control that protected your standard may also be limiting the people around you. The independence that helped you survive may also be keeping you from being fully open. The hunger that created success may also be making it impossible to experience success. So your discipline may be real, your ambition may be real, your work ethic may be real. But there's a question worth asking. Are you choosing them, or are they choosing you? Can you slow down without feeling guilty? Can you receive help without feeling weak? Can you let someone get close without expecting them to leave? Can you rest and rejuvenate without believing you're falling behind? There's a difference between a strength and programming. A strength is something you can use. Programming is something that uses you. And when programming produces success, we don't call it programming. We call it our edge. We call it our standard. We call it what makes us different. And maybe it did help you get here, but that doesn't mean it can take you where you're going next. So the cycle of programming is the inherited stories become adopted beliefs. Those beliefs become conditioned behaviors. Those behaviors create experiences, and those experiences become our life. And our life becomes the evidence that the story was true all along, and around it goes. And we don't see the cycle. You see yourself. You see your personality. You see your circumstances. You see your reality. But the pattern isn't your identity. The trigger isn't your identity. The ceiling isn't your identity. They're evidence of the story you've been living from. And here's what I would want you to take from this. The cycle isn't a life sentence. It's a pattern, and patterns have origins. And somewhere there's a story that started this. And maybe you know what it is. Maybe you don't yet. But almost any story would have become true, which means this story isn't destiny. It's simply unexamined. And the moment it gets examined, what's been running your life without your permission has to stop and identify itself, not as you, as a story. And when you examine the story, that's where everything changes.